In this first of 3 videos for our Tuesday class, we'll go over some updates to the course calendar, and I'll talk you through the rest of this short unit on the question of China in the context of the question of the Anthropocene, in which we're thinking about not China in the present day precisely, but China in the late Neolithic and the earlier dynastic period with the advent of the kind of Chinese history that we're all probably pretty familiar with, starting with really the Shang Dynasty, the establishment of agriculture as the predominant mode of existence and sustenance, simultaneous, over a period of centuries, unevenly distributed, but the simultaneous historical rise of villages becoming towns, becoming cities, larger settlements, trade networks, and so forth, taking us well into the Bronze Age, right, out of the late Neolithic, Stone Age technology, and into the Bronze Age. At the same time as this is happening, the roots of a lot of what we think of as Chinese culture are taking shape too. Chinese writing is beginning to take shape and spread. People are beginning to write things in books, in book form, on bamboo strips usually. And then we get the origins of some of the classics of Chinese history and literature, including the I Ching, or sometimes in English mispronounced as the I Ching, right? The Book of Changes, which is partly divinatory. It's designed to read the natural world and look for signs that are read and interpreted through what in English are called hexagrams, and in Chinese, gua, ba gua. We won't be talking too much about that, but that's happening very early on. And then we'll be talking too, more specifically, of course, about Lao Tzu, a little bit about Zhuangzi, and a third Taoist sage who Gary Snyder quotes and discusses a bit, Liezi. So 3 Taoist sages, interpreted primarily through the lens of translation and this kind of Western ecological take or interpretation of Taoism that we get through both David Hinton and Gary Snyder, 2 contemporary American poets, scholars, translators, who think a lot about Chinese culture and are also very involved in ecological critiques, what's called eco-poetry or eco-poetics, all of which helps us think about the question of the Anthropocene. And I hope this is an interesting bridge from thinking about the Holocene, beginning with the end of the Pleistocene, right, and the end of the last ice age, which we thought a lot about with Cave of Forgotten Dreams, and then moving into the Holocene 10,000, 8,000, 6,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago is the period we're interested in when we talk about the origins of Chinese culture as it comes to us in recorded history. And then even closer, right, just 3,000 years ago is when we begin to think about what takes shape as Taoism, right, and what finds expression Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi and Liezi, okay, which is the subject of Gary Snyder's essay largely. The Great Claude, and also something that David Hinton addresses in his writings about the origins of Chinese poetry and philosophy. Okay, that's kind of the high-level view of what we're doing now. To support this, we're going to be looking at a few different readings in the next week, and then it's on to writing a short paper. I'll talk a little bit more about that before this video is over. So, to review the syllabus and the course schedule, here we are, looking back to the assignment from last Thursday for today, and you're to have read for today Gary Snyder's The Great Claude again, and also a little bit more David Hinton, an excerpt from his Introduction to Classical Chinese Poetry, in which he talks about what he sees as being the empirical and ecological nature of Taoism. And to help us further understand this and distinguish philosophical Taoism from more ritual forms of Taoism, the things you might see if you go to a temple where there are a lot of supernatural and mystical things happening, right? This is different. That's the reading that you need to have done for today. Today I'll be giving you the video lectures in 3 parts. This is part 1. Focusing on the idea of close reading, we'll walk through that Snyder text. And then for Thursday, when we meet in our groups and in classes, I've got some additional readings, 3 texts. It's only 12 pages, but it's pretty challenging reading. So take some time to read this. One is an excerpt from a book called The Retreat of the Elephants, An Environmental History of China, which is a source for Snyder's own essay. Another is a short Gary Snyder essay called Ink and Charcoal from the same book. It's only 6 pages in the form I'm presenting it to you. And then the last is this text that I've already introduced to you. You've read the abstract. It's an academic journal article that has to do with geology, and it's, somewhat challenging reading. And although it's not that long, given all of the charts and graphs that are present in this paper, I'm not asking you to read the whole thing. I'm only asking you to read 2 highlighted excerpts, really the introduction and the conclusion, or the discussion at the end, which summarize the contents presented throughout. We're interested in the high-level argument for now. This is not a geology class or an archaeology class. We just want a credible account from the scientific side to help us better understand this idea of an early Anthropocene. So that's where we're at, bringing things up to date for this week. You've all received emails instructing you how you can participate in this group activity on the blog. And I really do encourage you to think about how you might apply some of what we're discussing presently in class to your questions and posts about, what's natural and what's unnatural. I think that'll be a fun and interesting exercise. Now, next week, I'll be giving you prompts on Thursday. You're going to go right into writing this essay. And next week, you'll also be focused on writing that essay all week long. And we're going to do it short. It's going to be a couple of drafts, not a long paper, shorter than the last paper, because I really want you to be able to focus on the writing and a few key issues to improve your writing and to improve your work with sources. So that's the goal.